Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Weaponizing phony white outrage continues. Ed Blum is a right-wing sock puppet who manufactures lawsuits in order to make changes in the judiciary because the white right can't find a legislature suicidal enough to try it themselves. He's the front man for the white right's lawsuit, or rather lawfare campaigns, that's what this is. Whenever there's someone making some phony claim that white people are being disadvantaged by something, Ed Blum will be the person running to get in front of the cameras. But then again, it's not exactly as if somebody needs to make some sort of claim. Ed Blum has actually been instrumental in manufacturing these kind of lawsuits. When they claimed that they wanted to attack schools for daring to admit black students, Blum was the front man for the cynically named Students for Fair Admissions. Of course, he has nothing to say whatsoever about legacy admissions, which are almost entirely white. Apparently, he doesn't feel that there's anything unfair about that. Since the Supreme Court, which is infested with Federalist Society shills, rubber-stamped Blum's lawsuit, that sock puppet organization is basically obsolete. But that's okay, because Blum and his pals have made up a new one, calling itself the American Alliance for Equal Rights. It sounds generic because it is. And what a surprise, when you go to their website, you see that Ed Blum is the president of this so-called organization. Truth be told, this isn't really a website, it's actually a web page. There are no other pages to it. This is it. But predictably, they're totally unconcerned about the rampant racial preferences for white people. Apparently, they don't consider that to be a problem. Their purpose is to attack any companies who give funding to black businesses, specifically to black female-owned businesses. This is part of the white right's overall strategy of racially targeting black people, a race war that Blum's been the front man for many years. What the white right is doing is trying to conduct some lawfare. Basically, they're trying to weaponize lawsuits either to intimidate people through the threat of bankrupting them through court processes, or to try to change some laws through some corrupt judges. Blum is going for the latter. Now, he lost his initial attempt to coerce a black woman-owned venture capital firm from awarding grants exclusively to black woman entrepreneurs. Blum and his racist pals demand that they give money to everybody, and that they can't specifically focus on funding black women's businesses. This is their lawfare, and they're not even being subtle about it. Right after the Supreme Court's ruling on affirmative action in schools, 13 Republican state attorney generals began sending threatening letters to big corporations like Apple, Google, and Netflix, telling them that the court's ruling also applies to employers, and threatening that they'll face serious legal consequences if they dare to hire anybody who the Republicans don't like. So they very quickly put aside any pretense that this was not all about race, and that the college admissions lawsuit that they manufactured was nothing more than a feeble front for what was actually going to be a war against black people in the society in general. That's what this is actually about. Now, Ed Blum has been out there filing these nuisance suits for the longest time, and they typically didn't go anywhere in the courts, but the last year or so he's actually had some success. Why is that? It's because there's a lot of right-wing nuts on the federal court. Mitch McConnell was psychopathically focused on this during the Trump years. It meant everything to him. That's the reason why, although Mitch McConnell can't really stand Donald Trump, nonetheless, Trump was willing to nominate all of the kooks, cranks, and clowns who the Federalist Society recommended for those federal judgeships. And as far as Mitch McConnell was concerned, that would be the way to give the GOP an artificial 20-plus additional years to affect laws even after they become a permanent political minority in the legislature. Now, the Federalist Society is who comes up with the list of right-wing nuts who they swear loyalty to their ideology and pledge to wipe their behinds with the Constitution if you put them on the federal bench. Let's go ahead and follow some money. Who is it who was giving Ed Blum money all these years for his so-called Students for Fair Admissions scheme? When you look at the names, you see that it's groups like the Searle Trust and the Sarah Scaife Foundation. And when you look at who it is who gives money to the Federalist Society, you see that it's also the Scaife Foundation. By the way, this is not an exhaustive list. There's plenty of others. There's a lot of overlap, but you get the idea. So, Ed Blum, as well as the Republican politicians who nominate these ideologues to the bench, and the prejudiced judges themselves, all these people are coming from the exact same source. The same wealthy white interest, the exact same wealthy white interest who pay Ed Blum to file these nuisance suits are also the exact same ones who go to Mitch McConnell and say, now here's the list of judges we want you to put on the federal bench so that they can hear these lawsuits that Ed Blum is going to be filing. They're all the exact same people coming from the exact same source. It's a closed loop of corruption. This is an astroturf operation being run by the same wealthy white racist who created and propped up other groups like the Manhattan Institute. The goal of these white oligarchs was to use their money to rig the system completely in their favor by making sure their operatives were on the bench, they were the ones filing the lawsuits, and the ones hopefully writing or at least influencing the laws. This is why, after all these years, Ed Blum's meritless lawsuits are finally gaining some traction. This has been a long-term project by the white right. Ed Blum has already said that he's going to appeal the lower court's rulings, and we know why. The entire plan from the very beginning is to put all of this stuff in front of the Federalist Society's flunkies on the Supreme Court. They don't care about losing cases at the state or appeals level because they already got the Supreme Court in their pocket. Now, there is something else that needs to be mentioned here, and given everything that I've just talked about, this might seem a little bit contradictory, but it's not. Earlier this year, I told you about the so-called minimum basic income schemes that were being tried in a few states. For those of you who didn't watch the video essay, the idea is to give lower-income women extra money that they can use for whatever they want, ostensibly for businesses, but the thing is they can use it for wherever they choose to. The white media focused their stories about that on the funds being given to black women, but in actuality, minimum basic income plans are for everyone. California's proposed minimum basic income plan is going to be for everybody. Now, when I posted my video essay about that, I also gave a couple of warnings too. The first warning was that we should make sure to guard against anyone trying to claim that a minimum basic income check is some form of reparations. It's not. Even if slavery had never happened, we as black people in this country would still be entitled to the government using the resources it has to enrich and empower us because that's just a basic part of being a citizen. The government is supposed to be doing things to put resources into the pockets of the citizens because that's government's job, at least a moral government, but of course we don't have a moral government. We live under a system of white supremacy. But my point is, don't let anyone conflate reparations with whatever social programs exist. They're both two separate and distinct things. Secondly, I also warn that when you see the government singling out any segment of the black population, in this case black women, for benefits, they're not doing that to help the black community as a whole. We've seen this one before. Now, I'm not saying that black female businesses getting VC funding is bad. It's not. The problem is the people behind it are doing it as a continuation of a gender war. We've been targeted by our enemies. They want to divide us, and the tool they intend to use is money. In the 1960s, they used government programs like welfare and food stamps along with a few white corporate and a few white government jobs as the wedge between black men and women. Black women were given welfare, food stamps, a few middle management jobs, and a job at the post office. And after that, we've seen a steady drumbeat of, well, all these black men are unemployed. How come these black men don't have jobs? White power has the ability to arbitrarily pick who the winners and losers are. That's why. Yesterday, it was government handouts and corporate token jobs. Today, it's venture capitalist money and government minimum basic income funding. Different names for the exact same thing. But the point is that we see corporations and the government singling black women out to get this funding. Does anyone seriously think that's because they like black women all of a sudden? Now, in the interest of full disclosure, the black woman-owned venture capitalist fund that Ed Blum's trying to sue, the so-called Fearless Fund, does claim to have a capital grant for black men, though it seems to be for far less than the one that they have for black women. My question is, why are they not making a bigger deal out of that? All the white media coverage about Fearless Fund focuses entirely on them giving money to black women's businesses. If they give to both black men and black women, common sense says that they ought to be talking about both of those things. The people defending them certainly ought to be focusing on that. When Ed Blum went after black students being admitted to colleges and universities, he didn't just focus on the black female students. When I see these white corporations and these banks and such who are contributing to these VC funds, I also have to wonder how many of them are best buds with Ed Blum, or better yet, best buds with the wealthy white racist donors who fund that guy. Now, while it's certainly gratifying to see a scumbag like Ed Blum being given a black eye, my point is we shouldn't still be having arguments about whether black men and black women should be on the same page when it comes to group economics. For the people who don't listen so well, I'm not opposed to the idea of a black woman-owned venture capitalist fund deciding that they're going to be giving money exclusively to black women. My question is, why are things like this always held up as black women excelling past black men, trying to stoke that gender war stuff? Why are some black women eager to go along with that narrative, that they're competing against black men? That's what it lends itself to. Is the goal to make black men think that they're left with no option other than to begin starting and promoting business ventures that are only meant to benefit black men, only meant with black men in mind? This is starting us down a path of being fractured and separated into separate gender camps. Now, who benefits from black men and black women dividing themselves along lines of gender for a second time? Trying to push the idea that one segment of the black community is exceptional over another? That's a recipe for generational dysfunction. It makes mutual contempt run rampant, and it results in that group not being able to work together. When I see big banks putting money into black people's hands, I know that's because they're trying to encourage a particular thing. My question is, what? Black people need money for all kinds of things, and normally we can't beg these banks for one thin dime. Now suddenly those same people are behind this black woman-funded, black woman-run venture capitalist fund? Reparations is unquestionably a good thing. But would reparations only for black men be a good thing? The same goes for group economics. Any economic venture that intentionally aims to leave fully half the black population out is supposed to make us ask questions at the very least. What I'm saying is, let's make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the 60s. Money ought to be something that brings black people together. If any of us tries to use it as something to divide us, or attempts to turn it into something to exalt oneself over other black people, then that makes them every bit as bad as Ed Blum and all his racist pals. And you can take that one to the bank. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Tazden, Amir Miller, Kennel Bender, Roxanne Allen, and Salim Muhammad. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.